Alright everybody, we're deep diving into subagents in this video. If you stay to the end, I'm going to teach you exactly how the anatomy of subagents should be structured, what to look out for, how to launch them, how to work with your orchestrator agent. Also, a bonus, if you stay, I'll give you also a pre-created template where you can simply just import the template into your own directory, and you can have 5 simple starter subagents to start and work with. You're going to have to modify the files themselves to be configured to your own configurations and settings, but nonetheless, it jumpstarts you with subagents and you can start working with them inside of your OpenClaw. Without anything else to say, let's get right into the video. Alright, we got a big one today, building subagents in OpenClaw. Now, what exactly are subagents, agents, just in general, what is an agent? So you understand the proper thinking and the foundation behind it, so then you kind of understand, okay, this is what an orchestrator is, this is what a subagent is, and once you understand just the basic definitions and ideas behind what goes into these AIs, you can kind of understand down the line of like what else I have to show you inside of these slides. So first off, what is an AI agent, right? So pretty much it's just an artificial intelligence where it can create a sequence of steps in order to achieve some sort of goal. Now, the way you're traditionally used to working with these agents is like, especially now with like some of these frontier AI models, they're so advanced, especially if you're using something like Manus, if you're using something like Perplexity Computer, even if you've already tried and worked with OpenClaw, they're so advanced to a point where even if you're using Claude Code, for instance, right, it's so like apparent in Claude Code or say using like Cursor. You give it a prompt, say you're coding a project or something like that, it'll create a full entire task list of things to do for you. And then from there, it's going to create its tasks. It understands the goal, which is pretty much from your user prompt. Once it understands the goal, breaks down the task or the goal into subtasks, and then it strives to achieve everything in that task order. Now, if you're using something like Claude Cowork, you can clearly see this even more apparently there because they made it clean, very user-friendly. You see all the context being loaded up, any skills, any connectors, and then it pretty much creates a whole task list of things for the agent to do autonomously. So by the end, in case there are any clarifying questions, it'll ask you before it drafts a task list and the sequence of steps to do. But once the sequence of steps are done, what it's going to do is try to zero shot your prompt to the full completion of the task or whatever it is you're doing. So that's what pretty much an agent is. This is pretty much the year of agents where everything's becoming so advanced to the point where you pretty much can just give it a single prompt, assuming it has all the context, all the information it needs. And then by the end of the output, when it gives you a response, you will have the task created. So that's pretty much what is an agent, right? They're autonomous AIs which can achieve goals through task setting, give them goals, give them tasks, schedule them to run, especially if you're using like cron jobs and like schedulers, and they will be completing you projects, right? The wrong dynamic your people are having with agents is that they are treating it as if it's a sort of back and forth conversation. Now, I made a more in-depth video on this concept in terms of like the mindset and how you can make this thing really autonomous. I will link that either in the description or maybe even tag it here in the video so you can just check it out whenever you have a chance. But in that video, I go over the concept behind how you can make these things autonomous by giving them tasks and also goals so that you can actually treat them as autonomous agents versus just prompting this thing and having a simple conversation with it. That's not the point of it. The point of it is to give it the proper foundation and the systems so it can go out there and do work for you and pretty much you not have to be the bottleneck. Because right now, when it comes to AI and anything in software, especially digitally where pretty much everything is just in the ether, you can just plug things up together. If you have the right foundation, these agents can pretty much access everything, and by the time they respond to you, give you some sort of deliverable or notification, the work is done. But the only constraint right now is if there is a human in the loop, or if say there's something highly sensitive, maybe you don't feel comfortable with the AI being in the loop, that's totally fine for certain industries and spaces. But once say you give the AI all the tools it needs, all the context, all the memory, all the access to any sort of backend or whatever, this thing can ship code, can ship projects, can ship slideshows, presentation decks, whatever, if you enable all the access and the capabilities. Otherwise, the biggest constraint for this AI to be as powerful as you want it to be is you as like pretty much the master orchestrator behind this thing, right? So that's my 2 cents on what agents are and how to kind of look at them. Now, you've probably heard this word flying around everywhere. It's called the orchestrator. Now, what the hell is an orchestrator? An orchestrator is pretty much the orchestrator primary agent, where it's the primary agent you're speaking to. You know what I mean? So now, especially if you're using these user-friendly user interfaces where, say, you're talking to Claude, maybe you're talking to Grok, it's very apparent in Grok, but you see sometimes when you're using the expert mode or the heavy mode, and then you'll start to see where you give it a prompt, and then you have a bunch of these agents like spawned to like complete the task. Like one's going to go research the website, one's going to go research another topic, one's going to go research x.com, whatever. And that all was spawned because of the orchestrator agent. The orchestrator agent understood your prompt. It has a tool capability to spawn agents based on certain skills you have, maybe connectors, whatever, and they will go out there to pretty much get the job done in terms of what you're asking the agent to do for you. And now they make the user interface pretty clean where you can kind of see like, oh, hey, there's like this really cool agent, like all these agents being spawned out there to do things. Claude does that too nowadays if you are in the desktop, and then you can see sub agents spawned. And more apparently too, if you work inside OpenClaw, you can also see sub agents spawned if you are, say, in the OpenClaw dashboard and you have access to agents. But this is pretty much the main idea behind the orchestrator agent. And you can think of it as like the king agent, where it has the tool capabilities to do task itself if you prompt it, whether the ability to spawn agents itself or to create any other agents. So when you were talking to the sub, or when you were talking to the orchestrator agent, that's the relationship you want to have with it. You want to arm it with the proper foundations, the systems, the proper prompts, whether it comes to working with the memory.md file, the agent.md file, or any of these other core files, that you understand the relationship behind the agent. And anytime there is a new session spawned, the agent can immediately load up that context and know how to work with you. You know what I mean? So it's not actually doing a task itself, but maybe it'll prompt you and be like, hey, doesn't it make sense to create a coding agent for this so I can just spawn it? The task is here clearly laid out inside of the project board. And then from there, the agent will be working on that autonomously, you know what I mean? Or on scheduled sessions until the job is complete. Because there's no point in just having this thing go out there and work on tasks on behalf of you, because then you can't really message or prompt this thing, especially if you're working with this thing in a single chat thread. The whole point of the orchestrator agent is to pretty much be like this, I guess you can say, chief of staff person, or just an executive assistant right by your side, where it has all the tools, the capabilities to do whatever you want it to do. And then it can be like, okay, hey, I have access to this sub-agent. Let's go launch him, or let's go launch this person. Let's go launch that, you know what I mean? And then it can just come back to you and be like, hey, I spawned these agents. They're on their way to go do their tasks. In the meantime, is there anything else I can help you with? That's the whole point. So I kind of highlighted this before, but you want to pretty much prompt when you're working with your memory.md files to make this agent actually treat itself and think of itself as an orchestrator. If you're giving it an identity, let it know that it's the orchestrator and that it has the capabilities and skills to create sub-agents. If you don't have a skill how to create the sub-agents itself, what I recommend is you pretty much just prompting it itself and just be like, hey, create a skill so you can create other sub-agents under a specific format I give you. So every single agent or sub-agent you create, it has access to these files or has these files automatically created. And anytime you're spawning them, they're always going to be filled out. And I pretty much kind of just highlighted everything before of how it works, but here it is just once again, just so you can see it. And why this is such a superior approach is because, as I told you before, if you are, say, already in like the 90 percentile of understanding what the heck is an agent, if you understand already what OpenClaw is, you're already like ahead of people by a large margin. And now here, like when you're actually watching these videos and when you're trying to understand deeper in terms of like how to work with these agents, what the heck you can do with them and like really stretch them as much as possible, you're trying to put yourself more into flow, let the agent be in flow and do other tasks in the meantime, where you can continue being productive. You can continue talking with it and maybe creating other tasks, because you don't want to be bottlenecked by yourself, or say you prompt it, it does something, maybe you go back to go working on something, you know what I mean? And it just kind of disrupts your flow. That's not the whole point of it. You want to talk to this thing and be like, yo, go hire this person, fully onboard them, blah, blah, blah. It probably has like a full entire autonomous task set or like list of automations it can work with and get the job done. That's the whole point, because now we're moving away from just say, I give you a prompt, it gives me a response, and that's it. But now it's more so these agents, you give them a job to be done, and then it only comes back to you when the job is done. That's how you want to be working and treating these agents. And not that like in a derogatory way or anything, it's just negative, but just more so if you have the proper foundation in terms of like how to work with these agents, how to lead them, how to give them the right tools and capabilities, they are going to be extremely powerful. And now I'm telling you, you can pretty much, your mind is the limit. If you can get creative with this thing can unlock levels of productivity that is unimaginable. You get more done per unit of time. You can have
tasks being executed in parallel. You know what I mean? Imagine your agent pretty much having the same brain and context as you have, which is the orchestrator agent, and then it can pretty much just go out there and do all the things that you would do times 10, times 100. And one thing I want to mention is that when you're creating these subagents, why this is superior is because think about it. You're probably good at one thing that your superiors who pretty much a bunch of other people. Or maybe there's a set of 3 things you're good at. Maybe you're good at, say, broadly speaking, coding. Maybe you're broadly speaking really good at marketing, and then broadly speaking, maybe hiring, right? That's fine. But the thing is, when you're creating these agents, whatever, you want to make them very, very specialized. I don't think we're yet at the point where it makes sense for these agents to be very like broad and universal, especially unless you're using a super powerful model. I noticed that if, say, I'm using something like Claude, it will do really well. Whereas, say, if you're using something more cheaper like Minimax or Kimi or whatever, if you're using cheaper models, opt and default to make them specialized in terms of what they focus on, the skills they have access to, any context that they get loaded up. Because from my personal experience, I noticed that when I work with subagents and I make them general agents, they don't tend to perform really well, and the performance gets trash over time. The longer the context conversations become and the more compactions they have in the conversations. So in my opinion, it's better to have a very narrow specialized agent that gets the job done exactly as you want it. Every single session that is spawned, it's in an isolated session, not in the main thread or session. So then it's always a clean slate, it's a clean prompt to work with, and it gives you exactly the output you want it to. Now let's really quickly talk about the anatomy of how these subagents work. I'm just going to move myself a little bit. Now, at the core, the way I structure these, and I mean, you'll see too inside OpenClaw that when you go into the subagents, I'll show you in just a bit too, but it usually tells you whether you're missing any of these files or you should get them created, whatever. But the core files are always going to be consistent. You want to give it the agents file, which is pretty much something like a preloaded context of information of like how to direct the agent, right? You don't want to overinflate these files, just simple snippets, give it a direction. Keep it absolutely lean, because the leaner it is, the better your performance is over time. Also eats less of your context, also keeps your expenses and operating costs extremely cheap. The memory file, this is like basic memory, like, you know, who are you, what this agent is, what should it remember in your project boards and stuff like that. The thing is, like, as a general rule of thumb, don't make these like preloaded context files inflated. You know what I mean? Just keep them simple. If you notice that your agent isn't doing something specifically, if it's speaking in a certain way you don't like it to, or if it's just being overly verbose, give simple one-line commands or just like bullet list instructions in terms of how to instruct and guide the agent. That's the whole point of these files, so they remember the context, any previous session histories, or anything they have to be importantly aware of. And that's about all. You don't want to overly inflate these, because the more intelligent the model is, it can kind of anticipate your needs and kind of figure out exactly what to look for. Whereas, say, if you're feeding these things with injecting them with context files that are each like 10,000 plus characters every single time on a new session, you already like eat up a crap ton of your context. That could be like 25 to even 40% plus of your context. And then think about it, you can only have a few prompts or a few session heavy tasks prompted for the agent. And by the time it gets to like the 5th prompt or whatever, then guess what? This thing is already tanking performance. It's already going beyond a context window, which is probably triggering a compaction. And then from there, your performance just decreases over time. And especially too, if you're using other providers outside of, say, OpenClaw or whatever, and you are starting to use, say, context windows beyond the, say, 250,000 limit or whatever these providers do, then they're charging you double the rates for what you would normally charge if you had a clean session. So moving on, the soul file, like the voice, like how should this agent behave and speak, the identity, like a simple file, the user MD, like who the heck are you? You know what I mean? What's your business? What's your life about? What's your goals? What are you trying to do with this thing? How are you trying to treat the relationship with the tools? Tool configs for the agent so it knows what kind of access and capabilities he has, the task.md and the goals.md. So let me explain what the task.md and the goals.md is, because this is an interesting concept and I also made a video about it. Now, what separates tasks and goals is, this is actually a system I pretty much created myself and I've been preaching. I created a video about it, like I said before. But as I said, these are agents that have their own goals and their own tasks to do. So when you're sometimes starting off with a fresh slate, maybe something from OpenClaw, maybe something from another open source project, they don't have all the necessary infrastructure in place. So what we're doing here is we're building the infrastructure so they can actually go out there and be autonomous. Because for instance, you want to pretty much mimic the whole entire process of like what Claude does on their desktop tool, or Claude Code does, or say any of these other tools, where there is a task file that pretty much instructs them how to use, say, a Trello board, or say how to use or create a sequence of tasks. So then it creates it, it scratches off all the steps that are being done. Once the job is done, it marks it as done, and it doesn't need to do anything else. It just reports, hey, I'm done. There's nothing else to do. You know what I mean? You don't have to keep the scheduler on. You could just turn me off, blah, blah, blah. But you're trying to mimic what these like advanced AI companies are doing just in your specific workflow. And also when you're setting goals, like every time they wake up on a scheduled cron session and they have the context injected. So if I'm putting this into the memory file, like, hey, on every session, wake up, look through the goals.md within your own directory of the subagent file, or the directory, look at the task.md, how to use like our task system. So sometimes you can just have all the tasks inside the tasks.md, or you can just link it out to be like, hey, here's how you access the Trello board. Here's how you access some other resources. Check that out, see what kind of tasks we have in queue. And then from there, you can pretty much get your agent to do whatever you want. So for instance, this is a sample board where, say, if I have a task.md file, which pretty much instructs the agent how to do things, it's going to go into this Trello board. It's going to look at what's to do, what's currently being done, what's blocked, what's already done, and it's going to know exactly how to push forward an agenda. So when you look at my actual task board here, so you can see this is more so like a reference of how to actually use this thing for the agent. So whenever it loads it up, it knows exactly what to reference. It understands how to go into the boards, what to look for. Some of this stuff here is going to be blurred out because it's just private, but the whole entire idea behind the setup here is to understand how to use the tasks board, how to use it, what to do with it. And then obviously I'm not going to review everything here going on in my goals thing, but I got a few things here where you can kind of see, and it's just a mention and list of priorities. What's the goal here? What are you working at? What should this thing know about you or your business, your personal life? Because when it looks at these things, it's just injecting context. So we get into as detailed as possible for what you want this agent to load up into its own context. Now, where do actually subagents live? You'll see in the OpenClaw dashboard under subagents, you'll see them have their own configurations, model settings, file directories. If we go here into agents, you're going to have this directory. If not, you have to just create it. It's a simple file inside of your structure. And what you're going to do here is you're going to see all these different agents I have, right? So you can see here they have their own, the file structures, the agents, the identity, the memory. And some of these, so if you're using some of these providers, feel free to find their documentation and just literally import it into your code base or your directory. And it has its own memory, scale files, anything has to be aware of, like how to use certain things. So this one obviously doesn't have any scale files here, but wait, let's see if I have one right here. So let's say I have like a lead agent. You can give it access to various different kinds of skills. So it can access, say, Composio, some sort of CRM or research tool. You can get very creative with these things. Otherwise, where agents are chilling is in the agent section. And then you can kind of filter by the agents you want. And then you can pretty much set what kind of primary models they have, any fallback models, what kind of files, and then you can kind of actually look through the files themselves, what kind of tool capabilities they have, and what you want them to be enabled with or not, and what kind of skills they got, what channels they have access to. And then, of course, at the end, the cron jobs. Now, there's a few ways how you can actually spawn these guys. First way is you want to go into the primary memory.md file or the agents.md file. And what you want to do there is you just want to have a simple line snippet where it's like, hey, the way I'm treating you is as an orchestrator. And what I want you to do is, rather than you going out there and do the tasks, confirm with me whether or not you want a subagent spawned, or you can just be like, hey, autonomously just send out and spawn agents or create the subagent for it. So then next time there is a repeated task, especially if you're repeating something, right? There's a subagent ready to be spawned. Otherwise, what you want to do is set up cron jobs. So on scheduled events and tasks, what happens is, say, every day, 9 a.m., you get a debrief of a subagent that does research on, say, X about the latest AI stuff and tech stuff. So you always get a debrief of like the latest things happening in AI, right? So that's a cron job based on scheduled tasks or just times. And then the last way is direct request. Be like, hey, spawn a subagent for this task right now. Sometimes you have to manually interfere. Otherwise, you can go into the OpenClaw cron jobs. And if you already have a cron job set there, you can just manually trigger the run, and then it will go out there and do some work for you. A pro tip I like to always tell people is that when you're working with agents and when it comes to really customizing your whole entire workflow, is you want to have a messaging system where it enables multi-channels, because then you can separate your personal conversations, your main conversations, any business conversations, any team conversations, any alert conversations, any, say, updates from your agents from being pretty much congested into one massive file, you know what I mean? Or just one massive channel. It's kind of stupid if you ask me. I think it's just better if you have like a main channel, personal channel, business channel, and then channels based on, say, I don't know, a department in your business or a personal life, whatever, and then everything is organized. And then when you are communicating with those channels with the AIs there, then from what happens there is it's pretty much all just organized. You know what I mean? You just want to have a simple organization system. When you're talking to specific agents, you will have the proper responses you want, you know what I mean, versus just everything being in a main thread. Also, what I'm doing is I created a repo right before launching this video, so you'll probably have the repo access. The link is going to be in my video description. But based on the templates and like kind of how I work on these are just blank, clean slate agents with just some information about like how to use them, how you can pretty much guide them, set them up yourself. So you can pretty much just import this into your own setup, set up your own AI agents, and depending on how you import it into your virtual private server or machine, whatever, all you really have to do is just drag and drop these files into the agents folder, and then boom, it's going to appear there. You can start using them and pretty much configure them to however you want. So it's all free. That'll be all for the video. If you want to learn more about AI and stay up to date with all the latest things that are happening, then check out my newsletter. It's free. I send out a newsletter every single week on Saturdays. So that's free on my website. Check it out if you want to learn more about AI and how this could help your personal life and your business, all that cool stuff, and just be really on the edge of everything coming out. Then subscribe and like my channel because I release content every single day. I'm always chopping something up, something new with AI, and you're not going to want to miss it. So thanks for watching once again. Comment what you want to see below, and I'll see you in the next one.